before I go into the topics, I will wait a little bit for people to tune in. So today, what we have on our agenda is 16 sociotypes, personality types, specifically live Q&A questions. Questions I have had submitted, no, I have received before this live, and also questions that are posed during the live. Topics such as INFJ-Fe subtype versus ENFJ-Ni subtype, and just subtype differences between mirrors. Then also semi-duality, compatibility in terms of possible exceptions to my general recommendations. Then also ISFP MBTI versus ISFP socionics, what the difference is, roughly speaking. So these are some of the topics we will discuss today. But yeah, like I said, before we jump in, I would like to see who's joining. So if you're here and if you're watching, just drop a hey in the chat, that would be great. So I'm just not talking to myself. I've never done this before on YouTube, so I will see how I can view chat. I'm not sure how to do that yet, so please bear with me. I don't think anyone is saying anything at this point. Oh, someone is saying hello. Hello, welcome. Thank you for saying something so I can see the chat and how it works. Okay. Yeah, I also don't want to make you wait too long. Oh, hi, someone else is watching. Hey. So, like I said, I will have some topics ready, but if you have any questions during this live, go ahead and ask the question in the chat. The topic is mainly 16 personalities, 16 sociotypes, MBTI and socionics, but you might also ask me some related questions. Hello, welcome. Okay, cool. People are tuning in. That's great. Okay. All right. So then let's just go into the first topic. I will read out the questions and then I will give you my answer. One moment. I have them on my laptop here to the side. Okay. So Eduardo Yeko 506 asked, hi, a good theme could be the mainly way to perceive the differences between the ambiverts in a mirror pair, between ISTP-SE subtype and ESTP-Ti subtype, or ENFJ-Ni subtype and INFJ-Fe subtype, and the other 6 pairs. So I'm not gonna go through all the pairs in this live now. It would be a lot unless some people specifically ask for certain types. So I will just focus on the ISTP, ESTP, ENFJ, INFJ. And you should know a bit of a background to this subtype theory. If you are from MBTI, a lot of people talk about the 4 subtypes. I actually don't do that. In socionics, there is one theory called inert contact subtype theory. And this is the theory I am using, and this is also the theory that is being referred to here. Mirror pair, if you don't know, in socionics, basically the types that have the same letters except the first one, aka like ESTP, ISTP, ENFJ, INFJ are the mirrors. So these are the types who have almost the same functional strengths, but I will go into that in a bit, and who are either introvert or extrovert. So these are the mirrors because they mirror each other, right? And a lot of people struggle with recognizing the differences, especially with these subtypes, because it really brings the types very close to each other. It can be very difficult to tell them apart. Like I said, the inert contact subtype theory poses that people can have a subtype from the first function or the second function or neither. So technically it's actually a 2 subtype system, but I say it's a 3 subtype one because you can also say there's quote unquote no subtype. And these are usually the people who don't fall into either subtype. Oh, by the way, I'm seeing a few comments. Hey, hello, hey everyone. Someone says hello from India. Where are you from? I was born in Germany, so I'm from Germany. I used to have more of a German accent. I think it has been going away a bit, so, but that's mainly where my accent is from originally. Okay, so back to the topic. Right. Yeah, so the 3 subtypes, first function, second function, and no subtype. Technically 3 subtypes. I've been using this for quite a while. I have to say, you don't necessarily need to use this theory, but it can really show you the differences between these mirror pairs, because like I said, it can be very hard to tell them apart, and people can be on a spectrum in a way. So this accounts for the fact that not everyone is like stereotypically super introverted or stereotypically super extroverted. There are people who are kind of like ambiverts, like the question implies or says, ambiverts, right? And I also said that in some previous videos. I also have a video about the subject, so you can watch it after this live, where I talk about the subtype theory in more detail. Because yes, you can be kind of in between introvert, extrovert a little bit. At least in the Jungian term, you will still be either introvert or extrovert, but with that subtype, which in this case is the contact subtype, the second subtype, you can come across as an ambivert, and you can come across as the opposite of who you really are. By opposite, I mean you can be an introvert who sometimes looks like an extrovert, or an introvert or an extrovert who sometimes looks like an introvert. So this is like the background with this. And in the past, I found this subtype theory very useful and the most plausible from the subtype, like from the subtype theories for the 16 personalities, because I've also seen that just walking around or just getting to know people, typing people. I also have typing services on typevolution.com/services. You can see my current services. So I've typed people and also just, in regular life, and you notice there are people who are kind of in the middle, and yeah, they also struggle with recognizing which one they are. So how this theory works in more detail: if you have a subtype at the second spot, like in this example here, you will come across as an ambivert. And there's also the theory of loops. I don't know if you know it, but in MBTI, the loop theory is quite well known, where you can be in a loop with certain functions. And this actually also applies to the subtype theory to some extent. And I was really overjoyed is maybe an exaggeration, but I was like, oh wow, there's actually an overlap here between MBTI loops and the loops in the subtype theory, inert versus contact, in socionics. What can happen is you can be in the loop of that function and the corresponding extroverted function or introverted function. I will talk more about that in a bit. So, and then also the reverse, the other functions will be weakened. Okay, let's go into a more concrete example, because I know this can be really hard to understand. So let's say INFJ versus ENFJ. So the INFJ with the FE subtype will have loops of using extroverted feeling and extrovert sensing to some extent. I mean, because I have to make a caveat here, because the extrovert sensing, no matter what your subtype is as an INFJ, is still gonna be relatively weak or weaker. It's never gonna be super good or very strong or whatever. I don't want you to get the wrong idea here. You are still in the confines of the main type, but there will be slight boosting, slight difference here between INFJ-Fe and INFJ-Ni, for example. So INFJ-Fe, when you first maybe meet them, you might even see a lot of Fe, or they might, just have a very warm presence. And on that level, they can come across as extroverts, and oftentimes INFJ-Fe tends to also have a lifestyle that is more leaning towards SF types. So this is the interesting thing, because the Fe is boosted and the Se is boosted, it kind of gives them the appearance of flavor of an SF type. In socionics, SF is the club that is called socials. All SFs in socionics, and I also would say, generally speaking, all SFs are somewhat like socials, no matter what their instincts are. Of course, when we go to Enneagram, if you are an SF type who is social instinct last, that is possible, by the way, then you won't really feel that fulfilled by social stuff. But in terms of your strengths and your interests and just how you go about life, you will be like a social. And you can look it up, you know, wikisocion.net is a good resource for socionics. So anyway, INFJ-Fe will kind of come across as an SF type in that sense. Comparing that to ENFJ-Ni, which will come across, at least at first, a bit more withdrawn, possibly a bit more subdued, and because of the Ni subtype, and also they will come across more like an NT, because the intuition is boosted, Ni is boosted, and Ti is boosted. So that kind of gives them like an NT quality, NT focus, and in socionics, NT club is called researchers. Now, you should not obsess over these titles like socials and researchers. It's a way of trying to describe it. Not every researcher is going to be an NT, not every sociable person is going to be an SF, but yeah, those are just the general descriptors here. So yeah, ENFJ-Ni, they might even mistype as NT. So INFJ-Fe might mistype as SF and things like that. So this is what can happen with these subtypes. To give, also last, what's also for me was the most interesting differentiator, INFJ-Fe subtype actually has quite strong introverted feeling. In terms of their functional strengths, introverted feeling is actually the strongest function in them, which is quite ironic because they actually prefer using Fe. The subtype also says which function you tend to prefer. So Fe subtypes, they really prefer Fe, and they really value Fe and Ti actually. And a Ni subtype, Ni and Se is quite a big thing for them. But at the same time, for INFJ-Fe, the Fi is the strongest. And with ENFJ-Ni, the extroverted intuition is actually the strongest function. So how this works in MBTI, this wouldn't make much sense. It comes, once again, mostly from socionics. This is the so-called demonstrative function. And it is, how can you say in this deck? So basically how it works in socionics, a bit of a backtrack here. INFJ in socionics is called IEI, by the way. I know you can also say INFJ in socionics, but usually the J and P has to be switched, and I will talk more about that later as well. INFJ is IEI in socionics. First two functions are Ni and Fe. And INFJ has not only Ni as a strongest function, but also Fi. And the thought behind that is because INFJs are introverts and they're intuitive, intuition and feeling are going to be the strongest. Oh, they're also feeling type, yeah. And the introverted version of those are the strongest because they're introverts. So INFJ's strongest function are introverted intuition, introverted feeling. And for ENFJ, it's the reverse. They are also intuitive and feeling types, but because they're extroverts, their strongest functions are extroverted feeling and extroverted intuition. But once again, the irony is that INFJ actually does not value introverted feeling, and ENFJ actually does not value extroverted intuition. And that basically means that all of us contain strengths that we don't value. We all have something we value and are strong at, and we have something we don't value but are strong at. I guess it can pose a lot of philosophical questions, right? Like, why do we have this? But yeah, I guess there's not really an explanation for why that is. That would be something we would have to think about or philosophize over. But yeah, it's how it is from socionics, and I found that to be true as well. Now, as a side note, I only use the theories I have found to work in my own experience, my own, you know, life and with my clients. I don't necessarily follow all the theories, but this is the kind of theory I follow, so I found that to be true. Anyway, so this is how you can tell INFJ-Fe, their strongest function is introvert feeling, and ENFJ-Ni, their strongest function is extrovert intuition. And this is actually how you, the main way how you can tell the two apart. So you will have to, of course, know how the functions work, what they mean, introvert feeling, extrovert intuition. But generally speaking, what I've noticed with INFJ-Fe people, they will be very self-referential. I tend to say Fi is kind of self-referential, and INFJ-Fe tends to very much infuse their work, their life's work, a lot with their own personal experience, their own personal feelings and musings on things. So this is kind of where the Fi finds its way. With ENFJ-Ni, what I noticed, ENFJ-Ni, when they use their Ni, they tend to collect all kinds of ideas, all kinds of, even theories in a way, from all kinds of different avenues, different sources, and then they combine them all, or they present them in an interesting way. So I have a couple of examples of these people. When you go on my other blog, viptypology.wordpress.com, I have several people I've typed on there. I mean, these are all people I have not officially typed. These are people like celebrities, fictional characters, and just public people, not personas, public persons I have typed. And when you go to the website, I don't know if I can actually show it to you. I will, by the way, I will go through the comments in just a bit. I first want to like finish this thought. I don't know if I can show you right now. Is that possible? One moment, I want to check. Okay, yeah. So, right, yeah. If you go to viptypology.wordpress.com, these are all the people I've recently typed, and you can go here to the side, and then you can go to Source types. And here you can see all my current examples of all the subtypes. As you can see, I have, I guess, made it my mission to find examples of everything. So let's see, INFJ-Fe, which is IEIFE. And these are the examples I have for you. Okay, I don't want to scroll too much because I also have some that I made private because I kind of changed my mind on them. So these are the ones that are public right now for INFJ-Fe. Annie, I think, she was the main example recently on my mind, but she is not really that well known. I will just shortly say her work is, psycho-spiritual. Like I say, psycho-spiritualist is IEI, my description of it. For my description, you can go on typevolution.com. Let's just go on here. Psycho-spiritualist, that's my typing. So yeah, you can click on the link and then you will be directed to my type description. Let's go back for now. One moment. Where is it? Oh, I can just go back here. Okay. Right, so I typed as IIFE. Like I said, so the interesting thing about Annie is her work is quite spiritual. You know, she also talks about manifestation and dreams and things like that, like very stereotypically INFJ stuff. But how her FE subtype comes out, first of all, you know, her bright smile, her very warm FE, and she also has a very much SF kind of lifestyle. So she creates art, which is in a way engaging her senses, right? So when she creates art, she's actually engaging her senses, kind of makes her almost look like an ISFP a little bit. And yeah, her lifestyle is also kind of leaning towards social. So I thought that was a good example, but like I know you might not know her that much. A more famous example, I think, is Sally from The Nightmare Before Christmas. She also has premonitions and visions in the movie, but she also is helping out with making clothes, which is also more of an SF activity. And Alison Armstrong, I won't go too much into her background now. Okay, and then let's look at an ENFJ-Ni. Where is it? So right now I have Iyanla Vanzant and Oprah Winfrey. Iyanla is also not that well known. I would encourage you to look, like I said, go to my blog and look at these examples and to really study these people. Like it's, you know, like you kind of have to study people to really see the differences. I actually want to go to someone, like I typed as EIE, like I'm ENFJ no subtype, but he might actually lean towards NI subtype a little bit. Like I said, it's a little bit of a spectrum with some people. Some people kind of lean towards a subtype or not. I think he might actually lean towards NI subtype a little bit, so I might have to change this later. Mark Manson, he's the author behind the book, what is it called? Like don't give, yeah, the subtle art of not giving a fuck, you know? He's the author of that book. And yeah, he's an ENFJ-Ni, I would say. Oh, actually, okay, I actually have to update my website. I think I made a mistake that I didn't put this into EIE-NI. Anyway, yeah, so here you can see here I did it correctly. I call ENFJ the inspirer. And his way of his self-help, self-development work is interesting because in the book he refers to a lot of philosophy. So he takes all kinds of concepts, ideas from different angles, different, you know, avenues, like I said, different pastures, ideologies, etc. And he compiled them in this book and made them relevant for the modern person. And I think that's a good example of an ENFJ using extroverted intuition to combine it into like a coherent vision that is relevant for people right now. So that's the difference. Oh, I think, like I said, on any when I showed you Annie earlier, she, like I said, infuses her own experiences a bit into her artwork. So yeah, okay. So these were like the main examples I had for ENFJ and INFJ. Okay, let me go into the comments now. Okay, hey there. Emily asks, would II and I also come across NT-ish boosted and NI-TI? Exactly. II and I's usually come across like pseudo INTPs, if that makes sense. Yeah, so they come across a bit like INTP, INTJ kind of, but yeah, depends how much they go into an INTI. II and I can really go a bit too much into their TI and then, like I said, look like an INTP. FI demonstrative for II, yeah, exactly. Some dude says. He says, tell us about TE from your experience. Okay, I mean, okay. As you know or don't know, I am IEI myself, so INFJ and TE is the point of least resistance, is one of the weakest functions for INFJ, IEI, according to Socionics. And yeah, by the way, it is one of the weakest functions because it opposes one of the strongest, which is FI. But because INFJ, IEI doesn't value FI and doesn't value TE, TE is the function they dislike the most or like have a problem with, you know, on some level, because yeah, they don't value it and it's a weakness. Personal experience with TE. Okay, I don't want to speak for all INFJs or whatever. I'm not going to say this is going to be the case for all of them. I'm just giving an example from my own experience. So usually I kind of ignore, I have a weaker sense of just regular things like I didn't, for example, not too long ago, I had no concept or interest in like kilometers, like, okay, I'm from Europe, so we use kilometers. I guess in the US you use miles. So I had like no concept of, is 9 kilometers long for walking or cycling or not? Like, I had no clue. I'm and I'm not that young, right? So I had no clue. Like the concept, like 9 kilometers, like in real life, okay. Like when someone would tell me, oh, I was doing this for 9 kilometers, I'm like, okay, I don't care. I mean, I don't even know what that means. Of course, I know what a kilometer is, but I'm just saying, like, that concept, I don't know. I'm like, whatever. So I recently had to look up of my own experience, okay, because people kept saying, yeah, I was trying, like a friend and I were planning to do like a trip on the bike, and then there were like bike routes, and one of them was like 20 kilometers or something, and I had no clue, is that a lot or not? Like, I don't know. So I had to kind of yeah, I had to look at something I've ridden before and then kind of compare, and yeah, whatever. That's the thing, I almost never have any interest in these kinds of things. Another thing is, another T example of weak Te or unvalued Te is, I used to drive the car from my dad or something when I had to go to places, and I had no clue what kind of car it is. I had no clue. I still don't remember what the brand is, whatever. And then one time after I was going somewhere and I had to find the car, and I could not remember what it looked like or where I parked. I mean, I guess it's pretty common, people forget where they parked stuff, right? But I didn't even know. So if someone would ask me, what kind of car is it? And it's not like the car was totally new, I've used it several times, so I just had no, like these are like some examples where it's like, and the thing is, I don't even hate cars or whatever. It's just factual information like this kind of is in the background. I don't really care about it unless I really, really have to do something with it or deal with it. Like when we were planning the cycling route, then I will look it up and then I will be fine. It's not too bad, but in general, I don't know. I really have no interest. I don't find it interesting, important. Or other examples, some years ago, people would ask me, oh, like, do you live in the north or west or south of the city? And I didn't know, and I didn't care. I never really bothered to look at the map and figure out where I'm living in the city. Like, but that was even longer ago. You have to know that as you get older, on some level, you get better at all the functions to some extent due to experience. The thing is, though, that your weakest functions, they are only really good, or, well, not good, but they only really get better as a stretch, but, they only get more information through experience over time. So an INFJ, let's say, who's very young, like a teenager or a kid, will of course have the worst TE. And an INFJ who is, I don't know, like already in their 60s, 70s, their TE will be better comparatively, of course, because over time they had time to learn all these things. But if you compare them to peers of the same also intelligence level, people around their same age, there will be these things that are lacking and that are a bit embarrassing. So yeah, I still, for example, where I grew up, I still feel like a tourist in that area. I still haven't really explored much, or I don't know. Those are some examples. I don't want to go even more into it, but yeah. Okay. Okay, Emily says, I think Golenko said the reason for a strong demonstrative is because it fuels our social mission. So I would have a social mission involving Fi and I and Fe, usually something in counseling fields. Yeah. I guess I agree. Social mission, I call it purpose roles, right? The purpose role is based on your strong functions and valued function, Fi and IFE. Yeah, so I call it purpose role. Yeah, social mission. Yeah, so it does help with that. And yeah, oftentimes it does go into counseling. Though I have to say, lately, or I don't know since when, a lot of ISFPs and INFPs have been getting into therapy. Like, I mean, not, well, I guess also as getting therapy, but I mean like as being therapists. A lot of ISFPs and INFPs, especially ISFPs, and that's because NI is something they aspire towards. So they can also get into these Fi NI loops, especially if they have an Fi subtype. To come back to the topic, they will have Fi NI loops, so that can make them look like an INFP, maybe even sometimes INFJ. And these people oftentimes go into psychology. A lot of psychology studies nowadays are very TE focused. Probably one of the reasons why I didn't feel super connected with it. So yeah, a lot of these people get into like being therapists, and it's not optimal. I mean, of course, there will be some ISFPs or especially INFPs who will be good therapists, but a lot of them are not, or are kind of semi-suboptimal at it, and then people kind of have problems. Yeah, so it is what it is. But yeah, it's not always a bad thing, but it can be a bad thing. That's just my point. And people, I guess it goes back to the point that a lot of people end up in some kind of profession or having interests that are related to their subtype, right? So an ISFP-Fi is going to likely go into something NF related. INFJ-Fe is going to go into something SF related. ENFJ-Ni to NT almost related, so people tend to go into these spheres, which is not always a bad thing, but sometimes it's missing the mark. Okay. An ISFP that do not really use SE. Yeah, ironically, INFJ-Fe is kind of like an ISFP who has not good SE and who values TI a lot and FE a lot. That's also how you can tell the difference between ISFP-Fi and INFJ-Fe. Both actually have Fi introverted feeling as their strongest function. So they can come across very similar, but ISFP, especially the Fi subtype, even though they have good extroverted feeling as well, they don't really care for it. They don't value it. So they will, I mean, the general version of it, they can come across very stone-faced, almost mistyping as a T-type or something. Because if you're very introverted, which ISFP-Fi is, and if you don't value Fe on top of it, you can really look like stone-faced or very withdrawn, not very emotional. And these people often also mistype as T-types as well for that reason. So, yeah. Okay, someone said, I thought self-development improvement was a Delta Quadra thing. It doesn't have to be. Depends, I guess, also what we mean with self-development and improvement. I would say it is very much an NF thing. And I guess, yeah, Delta has NFs. So ENFP, INFP, ENFJ, INFJ. Actually, I would even argue it's more of an ENFJ-INFJ thing because ENFP and INFP, they value introverted sensing. And introverted sensing is very much craving, stability, equilibrium, things on some level staying the same. Which I know is kind of in contrast to extroverted intuition, because extroverted intuition is all about all kinds of different ideas and, exploration. But this is the interesting dichotomy there. ENFP and INFP, they love different ideas, impressions, ideas. I keep saying ideas. But at the same time, they want to be very comfortable. They want to have, you know, comfortable bedding, I guess, or, you know, like they have these creature comforts that they want. So this can be in opposition to self-development, because self-development implies that you change, that things change up, shake up, and that you go on a different path. And this is more of, I would say, tends to be more of an SE valuing thing, or NI valuing. I guess both come together, right? So SE valuing tends to also want to have different impressions, but really more tangible changes, physical changes as well to some extent. So yeah, this is why I'd say it's actually more of a better, I mean, at least how I see it, it's more of an ENFJ-INFJ thing rather than ENFP-INFP, even though they both might be interested in it because they're just NFs. Okay. Emily says, an ISFP that doesn't really use SE is probably an SEI in socionics who are SE ignoring. Yes, that's possible. I will go more into ISFPs. Well, should I go into it now? Yeah, I actually can go into it now. Just recently, I saw that someone made a blog, like a comment on my blog post on ENTP, the experimentalist. And they asked, hi Olympia, can I consult with you? Why is it that you mentioned the least compatible type for ENTP is the aesthete, ISFP? I call them aesthete. But I noticed from this website that ISFP is the dual for ENTP. Can you please take a look and help me understand? And then they basically put a link from wikisocion.net to the Sensing Ethical Intro Tim, which is ISFP with the small p in socionics, but is actually SEI, the type that has SI and FE as the first two functions. So yeah, it can be very confusing. I've also written an article about the P and J conversion thing, so check that out on typevolution.com. So yes, SEI is ISFP in socionics, but it's actually ISFJ in MBTI. And ISFP in MBTI, aka the type with introvert feeling and extrovert sensing, is the least compatible with the ENTP. This is also based on socionics, and that has also been my experience. So yeah, and the tricky thing as well is that some sources claim that introvert sensing is about aesthetics. You could maybe even go so far as to say sensing in general is about aesthetics, but the focus is different. With extrovert sensing, because it's extroverted and it's externalized, it's actually appearance. You know, like the actual physical appearance impression, that's more of an extrovert sensing thing, and that's why I would say it's more of an ESI, ISFP thing, ISFP and MBTI. Versus, oh, I'm getting a lot of reactions right now. Why am I going? Why are people reacting with this? Okay. So introvert sensing can also be aesthetic in a way, but I would go more into sensibilities, more into introverted feeling, how, let's say, an environment internally affects you, right? When you go somewhere, but yeah, SI, SE can overlap a lot, especially with types like ISFP and ISFJ, because they are both strong at introvert sensing. So it will overlap you know, so this is why it can be tricky to distinguish the two. But I would say within SI, like I said earlier with the deltas, delta and Fs, the focus with introvert sensing is still comfort, feeling internally cozy in a way, like good, you know, it's, so they would discard aesthetics if they are not really sensorily functional, or if they make them uncomfortable, let's say, then they would discard that rather. But like I said, the two can overlap a lot, and it also seems like nowadays there are some ISFPs who kind of are becoming more interested in minimalism, and then people would think, oh no, just because you're interested in minimalism, that must mean you're an ISFJ, you like SI or something. That's not always the case either. So it's a complex thing, but yeah, extrovert sensing is to the extreme. Okay, to the extreme, it's, you know, plastic surgery, for example. To the extreme. Now, I'm not going to say everyone who values extrovert sensing is going to go into plastic surgery, but the people who usually have the most plastic surgery, the most extreme, tend to be extrovert sensing valuing, especially extrovert sensing as the first or second function. Not all of them, but generally speaking, because it's a lot about how you look, like the external, how you look, disregarding whether it actually is good for the internal body, right? So this is kind of like an example. But like I said, not every ISFP is going to do plastic surgery. I'm just giving one extreme, which can be unhealthy, by the way. So, but I kind of just use this example to make you see the difference. Okay. Someone says, I find EIE to be very goal aligned compared to IEI. ENFJ versus INFJ. Very goal aligned. I guess you could say that. ENFJ, because they're EJ types, they tend to have very strong psychic energy, if that makes sense. I mean, this is the case for ESFJ and ESTJ. These people really have the most energy across the board, also in higher age. Also ESFP and ESTP, of course, but ESFP and ESTP, because they're P, the energy tends to fluctuate more. It's more like in waves. Like they can sometimes be like, like whoa, and then other times it kind of goes down a little bit. With EJ types, it's higher energy and it's very constant. I mean, this is also something that comes from socionics. So ENFJ also has that more, right? Like ENFJ, because they're intuitives, they still will have less energy, mental, physical energy than S types. But like at least on a mental energy basis, they will still be higher and it will be more constant. Versus INFJ is way more fluctuating, because in socionics they're a P type, and that's because introverted intuition is a perceiving function. It's about perception. So IP types really have the lowest energy, especially INFJ, especially when I have NI subtype. You know, it's a struggle. They have the lowest energy physically, and it tends to fluctuate. Sometimes suddenly, woo, and then, you know, like it goes like this. That's generally speaking, by the way. That's not taking into account things like menstrual cycle that all women have, and all women will have this ups and downs, like based on where they are in their menstrual cycle. So these are the things you also have to know, right? Like, yeah, I'm talking about personality, but some things are also influenced by hormones and things like that. So yeah, okay. Anyway, okay, there's more comments. I'm still going through the comments. Okay, someone says, which type is most likely to be into psychic readings and stuff? Like types who value introverted intuition are going to be the most likely into this. A very common one is ISFP, believe it or not, ESI. They are also the most common to actually seek out someone helping them with this. Like sometimes they also might learn it by themselves, but these are the ones who actually like go to a psychic to get advice, you know. You would think that it should be ESFP or ESTP, but remember that unless you are very much aware of everything, like personality theory, most people are the most removed from the opposite of their first function. So ESFPs and ESTPs, unless maybe they have an introverted subtype, or maybe they know people who are intuitives or whatever, or, you know, unless they have contact with it, they can be quite removed from introverted intuition stuff. So you know, if your life is all about extrovert sensing, you know, doing stuff, being in the world and things like that, you might not necessarily delve deeply into, you know, psychic readings and things like that. Some of them might, but I found that usually it's an ESFP who has an FI subtype who tends to go into it because they have a stronger connection to an NI or introvert intuition. And of course, also people who are into it, of course, INFJs, IEIs would be as well. ENFJ depends a bit. I have to say psychic readings kind of also is related to type 4 fix in Enneagram. So I would argue ENFJ are 2s. So they don't really, I don't really see too many, I don't really see ENFJs being that much into it. There might be some exceptions, but it's mostly, in my experience, INFJ, ISFP, some ESFP-Fi people, and maybe some ISTPs, maybe. So you can see it's mostly related to valuing introvert intuition and feeling. Yeah, I think most thinking types will feel, well, not feel, but will think that psychic readings are a bit too woo-woo or whatever. Or, you know, they might want something more logical, but I think some ISTPs are into it. Of course, ESTPs could also be into it, but like I said, because they tend to be, on average, very removed from this kind of world, it's not as common. Yeah, but to be fair, almost like you could argue maybe any type could get into it, but I'm just saying the most common ones. All right, here it's so hard to come up with an example about TE. Someone said I went for a run. Okay. Someone says, "Hi, I'm not stupid, but I find myself occasionally not knowing really basic things, like your kilometers example. I'm IA as well. It's like I know enough to get by, but if you ask me to suddenly explain it, I'm like, yeah." Yeah, I have to say, I mean, like I said, so, okay, another misconception is that only INFJ are bad at TE, right? ISFJs are, and also INFPs and ISTPs. So they can all suck at extrovert thinking, all of them. Now, especially if they get older, ISFPs and INFPs, they might feel like wanting to get better at extrovert thinking on some level because they value it. So they might want to do that, but some of them don't either because they are just so much in their world of introvert feeling or whatever. So yeah, so my point is basically all IF types will suck at extrovert thinking or not really do much with it because it's opposed to their natural being or worldview. Someone says, I'm T demonstrative and I'd obsessively study car fact sheets, the taxes, and 0 to 100 times, etc. Okay. I would wonder, like, what's the motivation behind doing this, behind obsessively doing this? Because it sounds a bit more like TE valuing, actually. I don't know, of course I don't know you, I don't, you know, I'm just seeing a comment here, so, I mean, I'm just throwing it out there, because, yeah, like I would want to know, yeah, why are you doing this? Like, what's the obsession behind it? Is it just to gather information? Like, what's driving you there? Because if you're TE valuing, you might just want to know for the sake of knowing, and then it's more, yeah, that's more valuing. But if it's for a specific goal or specific aim, then it can still be TI valuing. TI, I mean, like, you know, ENTP, ESTP, INTP, ISTP, of course, they will also use TE fairly well, but it will usually be always in the service of one specific thing, you know, like some TI related thing. It's rarely that they are obsessed with it just for the sake of it, you know, that, so that's just something I would ask. Someone says T demonstrative would be a very useful way to be. I mean, yeah, it is useful. TE is inherently useful, efficient, factual. Someone says, thank you for using these examples. You're welcome. Emily says, yes, age really changes you. Our weak functions really only get better with experience. Yes, that's true. Someone says, regardless of your type, some dude says, regardless of your type, you've got to make a living somehow. Feeler in a world of thinkers. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. But I would say, well, okay, it depends, but I would say nowadays people have way more flexibility with what they can do for a living. Very, very, very much back in the day, you would do what your father did, right? Or what your, you know, like, especially guys, women would not even do anything, right? They would, I mean, they would do something, but they would be housekeepers, housemakers, whatever. And the guys would just do what their fathers did. So nowadays you have way more leeway and way more options with what you can do, and you can find something that is for a feeler. There are feeding professions, you know, so you have to just look for that instead. I mean, but I get it that oftentimes thinking jobs are higher, have higher salaries oftentimes. So that's also the reason why actually a lot of F types will have some kind of T type related job, especially if they are more intelligent. I keep saying this, but I don't know if it's clear. The more intelligent you are, the better you are at every function that you have in your brain, okay? But what matters is based on your general intelligence, like, you know, you will have functions that are better in comparison to the others. So a very intelligent F type can still probably find a job that is more T-type leaning, especially if they have a certain subtype, and be fine with it and get on with it, you know. But it's probably not the area of excellence. It's not probably not the most suitable, but they can get away. Get away is the wrong word. They can do it, okay? So yeah. Someone said, Klebertje says, I only recently learned I was SLE-TI after spending years thinking I was EINE. Wow, that's that's a huge difference, okay? I've grown up in an environment where beta SE and TI is absolutely not valued. Yes, that can do it. Oh man, okay, that's a huge, I mean, to be, well, yeah, I don't know. I think maybe in socionics it's not as bad, but oftentimes N types are just considered more interesting, you know, online in general. So it's many people mistype as some kind of N type. But yeah, if you're in an environment that does not value your first two functions, I mentioned that somewhat in another recent video of mine about how trauma affects your typing of yourself or how it causes mistypes. So if you grow up in an environment that did not value your functions, you will probably repress them, even if it doesn't make sense or even if it doesn't work. You will hide it, maybe even from yourself, but it will come out, or at the very least, you will feel there's a disconnect between the kind of persona you're playing and who you really are. It will feel like something is missing or something is off. So Salem says, did I miss the part about ENFJ? I think you might have. Okay, this live is really, really long already. It's already an hour and I still haven't gotten to the next, well, another question. I will do it in a bit. Okay, let me just go through all the comments. We still have some time. Emily says, Klebertje, that's tough. I feel like I grew up in an environment where FE emotion was really not allowed. Sounds like you maybe even had SE polar types around you. Okay. Okay. Okay, some more. Okay, okay, this is not really some more personal stuff. Okay. Okay, this is a bit more like background info of their backgrounds. You can check the chat later if you want to know more about that. I want to kind of get on with the next, like the last question for now. How to, Okay, someone asked, how does one figure out their function? Which are strongest versus weakest and the placement of each function? Get typed by me. Go to typevolution.com/services and get typed by me. Okay, this is a very broad question. I mean, I don't think I can go into it in detail now in this live, but generally speaking, strong functions are the ones that come easiest to you, where you don't have to put much effort in. It just is. And the weakest functions are the ones where you have to put the most effort in, where it's a bit of a struggle, where you feel like you have to learn from others to make it work. Now, as humans, we always have to learn from other people to some extent. Like, no one is born knowing everything or understanding everything or whatever. But what I found with my experience, yeah, the strongest functions, you need the least help with those. They come the easiest. And if you have to learn something, it tends to happen rather quickly. You don't have to put like I said, so much effort and elbow grease into it. With the weaker function, it's way more effort. It's more of a struggle. So I'd say this is the general gist of how to figure it out. With the placements, yeah, I don't think I can go much into it now. Can I give a little tip? Let me think. I will have a sip of water. General placement. That's a good question. It's really hard to just give one tip very quickly now with that. Just like I said, okay, maybe try to look at, okay, what are the strongest, weakest functions possibly, and try to figure out like which functions come easiest to you, and then figure out which one of these. So basically go with whatever is the most obvious to you. Okay, if it's the easiest for you to figure out which one are the strongest, then go with that. If it's easier for you to figure out which are the weakest, go from there. Like, you kind of have to see what's the most easiest for you to do, and then based on that you can kind of figure out the order as well. So let's say, I don't know, if Fi is easiest to you, right, then you must be some kind of IF type. To be fair though, all EF types are also good at Fi, so you might even be an EF type, you know. And then also some people who have Fi as the mobilizing or tertiary function, INFJ, not INFJ, INTJ and ISTJ and MBTI, or SLI, ILI in Source, they often overestimate their Fi as well. So they might also think, oh, my Fi is really good as well. So yeah, unfortunately, there's no straight path for everybody with this, especially when you try to type yourself. If you want my help, you can get typed by me. If you would try to figure it out yourself, you have to go with whatever is the most obvious to you. And then, yeah, I also have an article about the functions. I also have articles like the type descriptions on my blog, typevolution.com as well. You can just try to read as much as possible about it and then try to kind of figure it out. But yeah, it's tricky. Okay, some dude says some stuff about T and TI and how it can kind of relate to each other. Yeah, the thing is thinking, right? So it does overlap. He says it seems there could be a way to do TE through TI stuff and vice versa. Yeah, I mean, you might even do both, right? So, but if you want to figure out which comes like first for you in a way, Usually one is in service of the other. I see it at least. So for TI ego types or valuing types, usually if they use TE, it's in favor or in service of the TI goal or the TI objective or whatever. So usually, you know, this is how it goes. And with TE people, TE valuing people, for them, it's the other way around. Usually they use TI in favor of TE if they use TI, right? So there's usually this kind of configuration, but the two can overlap for sure. Okay, okay, let's go to the last question that I had. About compatibility. Manu says, I know your take. Manu VM4VB says, I know your take is to only date inside your quadra and consider people of other quadras only valid as friends or acquaintances. But seeing that some types are extremely uncommon, for example, ILE and LIE women, by the way, and that's ENTP and ENTJ women, and that the most needed function is the inferior one, doesn't semi-duality make more sense, not only over non-existent duals, but also over identical and mirror types, as they just don't bring anything to the table, except for mirror types which bring nuisances to each other? Yeah, this is a very loaded question and topic. As you might know from my other videos about compatibility of the 16 types and things like that, and also my type descriptions, I go with the socionics recommendation, which is same quadra. Now, even in socionics, you have to know socionics is also a bit of a composite of different socionists and different theories. And there are some core theories, you could say, like Model A and things like that, but there are so many different socionists who have their own take on the function, their own take on certain things. Generally speaking, people say that same quadra is the best, but there will be socionists who will say that semi-duals are better than like mirror or identical, and they will say like semi-dual is almost the same, like just as good as dual or activity, or even better than activity. So there are some people who have different opinions on it. My opinion is, based on the theory and also my experience and how everything works, I do still think, and I would still say that same quadra, aka the same valued functions, is ideal for close romantic relationships. Maybe even to all kinds of relationships, but there are some caveats with that. So yes, I would still say same quadra is best for romantic relationship, but the question is, what do you do if your dual or whatever is very rare and you want someone who also has your seeking function? So in MBTI terms, let's say, I don't know, okay, let's go with ENTJ women. So ENTJ women, so in socionics, if you are, okay, if in ISFP and MBTI, if your first two functions are FI and SE, then your dual in socionics is basically the opposite direction of that. So that's someone who has TE and NI as their first two functions, so that's ENTJ. So that would be, technically in socionics, they say that would be the dual, like your other half, you know, that the best type compatibility. But okay, what if it's rare? By the way, so also one of the reasons why I say same quadrant, I don't say dual, is because we have to take into account the individual. We have to take into account, yeah, what's most plausible, most realistic, I guess. What are their preferences? What are their attraction patterns? Because not everyone is gonna be the most attracted to a dual in a way. It's tricky. You kind of have to see what you're working with, what kind of person you're dealing with. So it can be individualized. Also what you're looking for in a partner, in a relationship. Like, are you even open-minded enough for someone who has such a different way of life from yours. Many people are not that open-minded, actually. I mean, they will say, I'm very open-minded, but then at the end of the day, they want someone who's just like them. But maybe if you're a straight couple, you want someone who's just like you, but like the male or female version of yourself, right? So in that sense, then an identical would be better, you know? So it really depends. That's why I say same quarter, because you get way more variety of possibilities based on, you know, who you are and so forth. I mean, at the end of the day, you only need one person, and I don't know if it's a cop-out. I would still say you can find the person. I mean, you can, if you really want to, you could find a dual, but okay. I would still say activity is better than semi-dual. Activity is, let's say, instead of ENTJ for the ISFP, you get INTJ. I would still say this is way better than getting ESTJ for ISFP. I know this kind of goes against MBTI recommendations, but yeah, what? Okay, besides me saying, okay, you can't just find someone, or you can't, you know, like, you just need one person, whatever. If you know, like, if you study people, if you study what they're interested in, you know, all these things, you can find certain types. Now, whether that's ideal or not, that's a different question. I still think you should look in areas that you have natural interest in. You shouldn't have to force or fake some kind of interest that you don't have. But yeah, in the spheres of what you're interested in, looking at, okay, what type is most likely into that as well, and then, you know, finding a way there. Anyway, so besides all that, I'd still say activity is better than semi-dual. With an activity partner, you at least still have the same quadra, and they will have your, yeah, seeking inferior function, you know, met, you know. It's not gonna be exactly, and it's not gonna be the exact same like a semi-dual. It's probably not, might not even be as interesting or whoa as with a semi-dual at first. But what really makes same quadra so, yeah, unique and special, I guess, is the level of psychological ease that you will not find outside of your quadra. Within your quadra, the psychological level of ease or feeling at home or feeling comfortable, but in a good way, is only found in the same quadra. You won't have that outside of your quadra. Now, if that's okay with you, then go ahead. Like I said, if I have someone in the type coaching session, let's say, by the way, typevolution.com/services, you can book a type coaching session with me. If I have someone in a session and they tell me this, right? Okay, I don't think I can meet someone who is a dual or whatever, and I want someone who has the dual function or whatever. I would still say try to find activity, but at the end of the day, if there are many reasons that actually are valid and speak for semi-dual, then I would say, okay, in your specific case, semi-dual could be fine. But once again, you have to have your priorities straight. So you will have to be aware of what are your priorities. Do you want to have high psychological ease? Like, do you want to feel like you're home? And I think I talked about feeling like home in a different video. But there's feeling like home with someone who is just like your parent was, which may or may not be compatible. And then there's a feeling of home where it fits in terms of psychologically fitting, like your personalities actually fit. And the latter example of feeling home, you don't get, you know, outside of your quadra. So if that's fine with you, you know, if you don't really care like about high personality compatibility, then okay, semi-dual is fine. What the thing is with a semi-dual will often seem quite attractive initially as well, you know, like, ooh, you know, like, because they have the seeking function high up, And they will also be easier to approach or deal with on the surface because, let's say in the case of ISFP and what was the semi-dual, ESTJ, they will, for example, in this case, be able to connect on both being sensing types, right? So it's a bit more accessible. It's not as extremely different from you, so it will feel a bit more easy to meet each other, to get along on at first, right? But then over time you realize, oh, this person keeps going into its introverted sensing. It's kind of annoying, you know, like this is how, from the perspective of ISFP, like, oh, why do they keep going to introverted sensing? I don't care about all that, you know. It's, and then people, I've noticed in marriages of semi-duals, people kind of will almost jokingly turn a blind eye to those interests that the person has, like, yeah, okay, here they go, you know, like, okay, you know, that kind of attitude. So if you're fine with that, then okay. You also will feel more on edge in a way. This is also the opposite of the psychological ease. You will feel more on edge, like you cannot be your full self. And especially if you're younger, or if you're the kind of person who tries to appease others or be people-pleasing, all that, you might try to be more like what they want, but it's not who you really are. So people start morphing and trying to morph themselves into a different type. By the way, this happens in all relations except for the duality relations. In every relation, people will kind of become a little bit like a different type, especially if they have a very strong romantic relationship. They often try to become more like a different type a little bit due to the interactions, but it's the strongest with some types and not so much with other types. And it also depends on the individuals involved. So anyway, yeah. Yeah, other reasons why I would say semi-dual is okay. Like I said, if you care more about, I don't know, attraction. Let's say someone is super attracted to semi-duals and not at all attracted to same quadra. Then okay, maybe. But I don't think attraction is a good reason, because there are other ways to increase attraction or find someone who is attractive to you, not just personality. I mean, yeah, so I don't think attraction is the best reason, but it can be a reason. Yeah, what else? I mean, to be fair, there can be some advantages to having a relationship with someone who's not in the same quadra. For example, I guess if you have children, and if you have children from a very different quadra, it might help a bit, because I don't know, let's say your child is from your opposite quadra, but if the other parent has a different quadra, then at least they are halfway compatible, if that makes sense. So in that sense, maybe when it comes to the children, it would be more useful or more beneficial. But the thing is, okay, you have children, and then besides the children, you still need to enjoy each other, right? So if you're looking at like a life partnership, you know, not just with the children, but also on a closer level with each other, it's just better to have same quadra. It cannot be beat. I don't think it can be beat. Yeah. So if you only focus on the children, then okay, different quadras can be beneficial. But if you want to have a more intimate, psychologically intimate relationship, it's better to have the same quadra. Like I said, I will never really say it's best to go with something else, but like I said, if we talk with each other and I will have to know more about you, we will have to discuss more things, I might say semi-dual could be okay. You know, I'm not gonna be the person who says, no, it's the worst thing in the world. But for the sake of argument, for the sake of my general aim with teaching you about all this or telling you about all this, most people in the world, I would say, don't go with same quadra. Well, okay, maybe that's a bit broad, maybe that's too much of a claim, but okay, I'd say a lot of people, in my experience, a lot of people don't have a partner from the same quadra, which is surprising. It's more common with some types than with others, but a lot of people don't. And I think it kind of, their relationship kind of suffers for it. Yeah. It's a tricky subject. So like I said, there might be reasons why it can still be good to go with a semi-dual, but generally not. So that's how to summarize it. Okay, I ranted about this a bit, but okay, let me see what you say in the comments. Have you noticed as well that people often go for their quasi-identical? I've seen SLE, LSE, and EIE. Oh my god. EII. Okay, I cannot say it. INFP, INFJ, whatever. Okay. Quasi-identical, same letters, except the last one is different. And technically identical strengths and weaknesses, but the valued functions are opposite, right? So INFJ-INFP is NIFE versus FINE, and things like that. I have seen that. I don't think it's that common, but when I've seen it, it was mostly with young people, like teens, maybe early 20s, and it doesn't last long. Now, once again, with all of these things, are the people involved correctly typed? That's always a question, right? And of course, unfortunately, that's always something that we struggle with, especially as people who try to type others, or who, you know, like whenever people ask me these kinds of things, or say, oh, have you noticed this, or what do you think about that? And then the question is always, well, are they correctly typed? We don't know, and that makes it tricky. Going off the theory and what I've seen, like I said, early younger couples, and usually it doesn't go beyond a year. Usually it's even just a few months. That's what I've noticed. Usually it doesn't stick. It's just because the quadra values are just too opposite. It just doesn't stick. That's been my experience or my observation, but yeah. Quite troubled relationships, but seems to work out kinda. I haven't seen any of these being long-term. Personally, I haven't seen it. Yeah, so, but maybe, I don't know. I would definitely, a match I would not recommend, by the way. Definitely not. And SLE arresting his EIE activist pro whatever soulmate to cop SLE. Wow, that's actually a funny scenario, yeah. Like, that would be funny. I think a lot of cops are actually LSI, but that would be even funnier, right? Like an LSI arresting EIE. That would be funny. Yeah. The movie Breakpoint. I don't know. Sorry, I don't know this movie. Hey, someone said hello. Yeah, I cannot take people's word for it. Yeah, I cannot really. I've had people like this in comments and whatever, like saying, oh, I'm this type and I'm that type, and we are very happy and we are going against the theory, you know, we're like rebels, you know, and it's like, well, we cannot confirm or deny that that's really what you both are, you know. It's hard to argue with it or say anything. It's like, yeah, maybe you are rebelling against the theory, but most likely not, at least what I've observed. Most likely someone is mistyped, you know, like, yeah, I don't know, like people saying, oh, conflictors can be attractive. Yeah, okay, maybe on the surface, but I don't know any conflictor couple. I've never known one. I've never noticed or seen one. It's so out of pocket. It's so, I don't know, yeah. Have to speak with someone face to face, lol. Yeah. There's always these people who wanna kind of disprove something by saying, oh, that's what I am, and that kind of disproves everything. But once again, we cannot confirm or deny that's what is going on. So yeah. Okay, do you guys have any other questions for me? Because I'm finally through with the questions I want to discuss today. Yeah, let me know if you have any other questions. Just tell me in the comments, and then I will finally close this live. Good job, thank you. My first YouTube live. I mean, thankfully I've done Instagram live before. Type Evolution, I also have an Instagram page. Yeah, so thank you. Okay, great. Yeah, I'm happy you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. And yeah, I will probably do more lives like this. So I might alternate with 16 personalities, and the next live is probably going to be about Enneagram. So if you guys have questions for Enneagram, you can also check my YouTube channel and check my posts, or yeah, my posts, and where I asked for people's topics or questions, and then just type it in there in the comments. Okay, someone says differences between ESI and SCE. Actually, I made a few notes about that one. Still related to the subtype topic. By the way, I hope my phone is not gonna die. I cannot check the battery, so if I suddenly disappear, I'm sorry for that. Okay, because this live has been going on for a long time. ESI, SE, yeah. The quickest difference, which also goes back to the subtype theory again, like if people are kind of in between both, you know, as ESI-Fi and SE, no, sorry, ESI-SE subtype and SE-Fi subtype, okay, ISFP-SE, ESFP-Fi, they're kind of very, very close with each other, very, very close on the line. So with this subtype, and once again, we go back to the demonstrative function. The strongest function of ISFP SE subtype is actually introvert sensing. The strongest function of ESFP-Fi subtype is actually extrovert feeling. So you can just check, okay, does this person display more extrovert feeling or more extrovert sensing in their lifestyle, in their behavior, whatever you want to call it. You can also watch my video series about voice typing that might give you some clues as well between like ISFP, ESFP. ISFP is the sincere communication style, and ESFP is the passionate communication style. Also, ISFP SE, because their sensing and thinking is boosted, they can come across more like an ST. Actually, a lot of ISFP SE people go into things like bodybuilding, working out, fitness influencers. I notice a lot of them are going into that sphere, which is actually tends to be more of an ST thing, but yeah, well, not unfortunately, but also ESFPs can go into that sphere as well. But ESFPs who can come across like ISFPs are going to be FI subtype, and they are going to have boosted intuition, so they're going to look more like an NF actually. So that's going to be different. They're not really as stereotypically physical as the standard ESFP. I mean, they still kind of are, but I'm just saying comparatively speaking. They are more interested in humanitarian things, you know, like things that push them more towards NF territory. So that's kind of how you can tell them apart. What's your MBTI? I mean, question is, what do you think my MBTI is? I don't know. I mean, I don't like to proclaim my type as much, because then people try to see everything from that lens and they just run with it, and I don't know. I mean, yeah, INFJ. Yeah, okay, INFJ. Yeah, INFJ. Yeah. They asked INFJ, and it is INFJ. The funny thing is, my significant other, he actually said that you are lucky that you are actually one of the, you know, quote unquote real INFJs, because most people get INFJ as a test result, and you just got lucky that you were not wrong, you know. It's true, you know. I just get lucky, you know. yeah, anyway. Someone Sage says, okay, Enneagram related, instinct variant compatibility is important to find the same instinct. Yeah, well, I also have a video about instincts compatibility, so check that out if you're interested in that. SXSP, it's kind of beyond the topic of this video, but yeah, I say more about that in the video. Can be a good match with each other, but not in all cases. Then one question is, do you have an idea how we can bring typology more to the masses, introduce it to the workplace? I mean, that's what MBTI has done in America, right? So I guess what MBTI is doing, like, yeah. Or just making more videos on the topic, like trying to make it more popular, right? That's another way how to do it. It's even popular in Korea, in South Korea, so, but that's because of America. Yeah, the only way really is to make it more popular, more widespread. I am positively surprised that Socionics is gaining more traction, even though it comes from Russia originally, so it makes it harder to get it into the Western world. But yeah, years ago, I don't know, like a couple of years ago, maybe 5 years ago, Socionics was not really much on YouTube at all. Like, or like most people had zero understanding or very little understanding of it. Or the community was very, very small. But it's more people are getting into it, and that's interesting, that's cool. So, okay, I've been here for 1.5 hours almost. Okay. I can say he is in the same quarter as me. I have to say I'm quite I can be quite private about my private life. It makes sense, right? Yeah. So yeah. No worries, keep it private. Yeah, thank you. I mean, I might open it up a bit more in the future, but for now it's like it is. Yeah, he wants to not be in videos and things like that. That's his preference. We'll see what happens, but yeah. Okay. Thank you for the live. I came pretty late. Okay, make sure you rewatch it later, and where I talk about everything, and I will probably give more links in the description and in the comments, the things I talked about today. So, okay, have a good one, and see you next video or live. Have a good rest of the day. Bye.